All right, let's dive right into this explainer because we really need to unpack the urgent reality of wildfire risk facing the communities of the Yukon Southern Lakes. Honestly, if you live in or around Mount Lorne, Marsh Lake, Carcross, or Tagish, the information we're about to cover is absolutely critical. We're looking directly at a recent, incredibly comprehensive risk assessment report that, well, it pulls no punches about the wildfire potential in this gorgeous area. But more importantly, and this is the good news, it lays out exactly what options are available right now to drastically reduce your risk of loss.
We're going to start off with this really profound insight directly from the report. For millennia, fire was an essential tool, a totally natural part of the land, used by indigenous peoples of the Yukon Southern Lakes to actively manage ecosystems. Fire was allowed to burn, and because people were highly mobile, they could just adapt and move. But as we shifted to permanent settlements, that relationship completely flipped. We traded respect and mobility for a really deep-seated fear of fire and this intense need to control it.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll hit the wildfire threat reality, assessing the true risk, a world without suppression, defending the landscape, and finally, protecting your home.
Section 1. The wildfire threat reality. Let's look at how things have fundamentally shifted in the Southern Lakes.
Okay, take a look at the exact boundaries of the Fireshed Assessment Area. It covers a massive 905,000 hectares, and you'll notice it specifically excludes the city of Whitehorse, so the focus is entirely on the Southern Lakes communities. If you're out in Mount Lorne, Marsh Lake, Carcross, or Tagish, this right here is your backyard. This is the exact landscape where experts evaluated some pretty intense compounding dangers. You know, things like climate change, hotter summer temps, and prolonged droughts stressing out local forests.
This side-by-side really hits the nail on the head. Historically, the fire reality was a natural mosaic of healthy forests with fire used actively as a tool. But our current reality? Well, it's defined by long-term fire suppression and permanent settlements. Basically, decades of modern policy insisting we put out almost every single fire has ironically led to massive, incredibly dangerous fuel buildups right next to where we live. We've literally stockpiled combustible material right outside our front doors.
Section 2. Assessing the true risk. Let's see what happens when the data meets the geography.
So how do the experts actually measure the danger? They use this specific formula. Total risk equals the probability of ignition combined with the consequence of that fire. Probability looks at the historical frequency of lightning strikes and human mistakes, plus how ready that forest fuel is to burn. Consequence, on the other hand, measures the devastating impact to life, property, vital indigenous landscape values, and the local economy. It's a really holistic way of looking at exactly what stands to be lost.
Section 3. A world without suppression. We need to talk about the worst-case scenario.
Imagine a severe fire season where regional firefighters are completely stretched thin fighting fires elsewhere. It's actually vital to plan for a scenario with zero suppression resources. Now look at these two maps side by side. The areas with the highest probability of a wildfire, those deep reds and purples, perfectly, and I mean perfectly, overlap with the highest consequence community zones. They run right down the highway corridors and directly over developments in Carcross, Tagish, Marsh Lake, and Mount Lorne.
And that overlap brings us to a highly sobering statistic. Look, the land rated as moderate to very high risk is roughly 4%. Now, 4% sounds super small compared to the vast Yukon wilderness, right? But it is incredibly concentrated. That 4% sits squarely on top of human habitation and our highway corridors. We are talking about up to 35,000 hectares of extreme vulnerability that covers the exact footprint of your communities and the only roads in and out.
We really have to emphasize this stark reality. Under severe weather conditions, which the report calls 90th percentile climate conditions, the current dense forest fuels near these communities would sustain catastrophic crown fires. A crown fire isn't just a fire on the ground, it races rapidly through the very tops of the trees. It is nearly impossible to stop, and it would severely impact the ability of these communities to ever quickly recover.
Okay, Section 4. Defending the landscape. Let's shift gears enthusiastically to the macro-level solutions.
Let's break down a forestry term you are definitely going to be hearing a lot about, the shaded fuel break. Essentially, it's a fuel break built in timbered areas where trees are aggressively thinned and pruned. They aim for a 2 to 3 meter bare trunk base height, opening up the canopy to about 35 to 40% crown closure. Think of it like a giant thinned-out shield for the community. By removing the ladder fuels that carry fire upwards, it literally forces a severe crown fire to drop out of the trees and back down to the ground. And once it's on the ground, firefighters actually have a fighting chance to stop it.
We also need to talk about prescribed fire. This is the knowledgeable, intentional application of fire to a specific area to accomplish forest management goals. It's an absolutely essential historical tool being carefully reintroduced to safely burn away that hazardous surface fuel buildup we just talked about. It's literally fighting fire with fire, but on our terms, during safe weather windows, just as indigenous stewards did for thousands of years.
To see this on a macro scale, check out the thick red lines on this map. The report proposes utilizing and widening existing right-of-ways along Highway 2 and Highway 8 to act as massive 250-meter-wide shaded fuel breaks. That is huge. This landscape-level infrastructure would significantly secure those critical evacuation routes, acting like a fortress protecting Carcross, Tagish, and the surrounding areas.
Finally, Section 5, protecting your home. Let's bring this right down to what you can do. While landscape breaks take time and major government coordination, the perimeter of your personal property is completely under your control today. Here are the exact, empowering recommendations from the report for Southern Lakes residents. Number 1, adopt fire-smart principles. Clear debris, manage your vegetation, create a defensible safe zone around your house. Number 2, assess your neighborhood evacuation routes. You need to know exactly how to get out if a fire rapidly approaches. Number 3, research backup power for critical infrastructure, because power grids are highly vulnerable to fire. And number 4, engage in community wildfire education. Share this explainer, talk to your neighbors, and work together as a team.
I want to leave you with this really powerful question to think about. When the next fire comes, will your community be a fuel source or a fuel break? The data is crystal clear. The risk is incredibly real, and our climate is shifting. But the future preparedness of the Southern Lakes, whether you're in Mount Lorne, Marsh Lake, Carcross, or Tagish, is entirely in our hands. Knowledge is your very first line of defense. Now it's time to act on it.